Welcome to Spoken Injustice, where we put the criminal justice system in the dock. Our video today is part of our personal stories series. We will be joined by Michael O'Brien, a victim of a miscarriage of justice. His story has been told by many, but today we will hear from Michael O'Brien's own voice, in true Spoken Injustice style. We have said and reiterate here and now, there is no greater power than one's own voice. The aim of this video is to gain a comprehensive understanding of Michael's own experience, the impact of this wrongful conviction on his life, and his insights of our criminal justice system. By way of background, on the 12th of October 1987, Philip Saunders, a newsagent from Cardiff, was discovered severely injured in his garden, having been brutally struck multiple times on the head with a shovel. He was taken to the hospital where he succumbed of his injuries a few days later. In discussing these tragic events, we want to extend our deepest sympathy to Mr. Saunders' family and assure them that our intention is not to cause any distress. For several weeks following the incident, the investigation into Mr. Saunders' murder yielded no leads. However, a month later, 3 suspects were arrested and subsequently charged with his murder. The trial commenced in June 1988, and on the 20th of July 1988, all 3 men, including Michael O'Brien, were found guilty by a majority jury verdict of 10-2. Each of the men was sentenced to life in prison. The convictions were largely based on a flawed confession from one of the co-defendants, who was later found to be a pathological liar and to have suffered from antisocial personality disorder, and on other witnesses' accounts who later admitted to have lied. On those bases, the convictions were quashed on appeal in 1999. By then, however, Michael and his co-defendants spent 11 years in prison. Hello, Michael, and welcome to Spoken Injustice. We are truly thankful for your willingness to share your story with our Spoken Injustice community.
Well, I'm very grateful to be here, and obviously I hope to bring a lot to the table, bring some positivity out of some sad and negative injustices which have happened. I think that's very important to say, because it's not all doom and gloom. You know, people do get out, people do get their name cleared. Andy Malkinson recently, myself, the Birmingham Six. So we've got to look at the positives as well. Innocent people do get their name cleared, and we've got to look at it from that point of view as well, rather than the CCRC of this and the CCRC of that. I know their hard work, but unfortunately we've got to work with what we've got. I think we'll focus on the positive today. I think if that's okay.
Thank you so much, and we are extremely grateful. To best serve our community, Barbara and I have planned to divide this video into 3 parts, if that's okay. In the first part, which will be led by Barbara, we would appreciate if you could share, obviously, your story and the impact of the wrongful conviction on your life. And then the second part, which I will be leading, will be more focused on the criminal justice system at the time when you were convicted, and also currently, and what are your thoughts about the criminal justice system currently. And finally, yes, we will focus, as you said, on hope, and that's what we need to give to our community. That will be our final part. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Thank you. So I will pass on to Barbara to take the floor.
Michael, it's really a pleasure to meet you, and I echo Anna in saying thank you very much for taking part, sharing your valuable time with us so that we can share your story with our community. The first question I wanted to ask was, could you describe the circumstances that led you to wrongful conviction?
Well, yes, on the night in question, me, Darren Hall and Ellis Sherwood, we were up to no good. I'm going to be honest with you and frank with your listeners, your viewers. We were out trying to steal a car on the night in question. You know, I was trying to fit in and be one of the boys, which I described in my book, The Death of Justice. I never fitted in school. I had the National Health glasses. I was very skinny and I was bullied in school. So I didn't have many friends. So when this opportunity come along, I felt I had a chance to be one of the boys. So I went out and tried to steal a car with them on the night in question, and that's what we were up to. But unfortunately for us, a few miles down the road, Philip Saunders, a Cardiff newsagent, was brutally robbed of his shop's takings and brutally battered about the head and died 5 days later from his injuries. That was on the 12th of October he got attacked, and he died on the 17th of October. And we were basically in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the evidence against us, which is very alarming, the way the police used the evidence, my co-accused Darren Hall, we didn't know this at the time. You know, I was only 19, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I knew there was something wrong with the man. You could tell that by his demeanour, you know, his boastfulness and everything like that. And he'd done 14 different confessions when he was in the police station, and they focused on the one he made against me and Ellis Sherwood, saying that he was the lookout and we done the crime. We killed Philip Saunders and he was the lookout. Now, unbeknown to us at that time, Darren Hall had confessed to crimes he hadn't done before, and that was never made available at the time of our trial, which I'll go in a bit of detail later. But it is relevant because had the jury known that at the time, this miscarriage of justice would never have occurred. So they had the evidence of Darren Hall, and while we were on remand, there was a number of prisoners who alleged we confessed to them. Prison snitches, as they call them in America, prison informers. And I've never seen any of these people in my life before, and they were on Rule 43. Now, Rule 43 means you're segregated from all the other prisoners, so how we were supposed to confess to them, I really don't know. But nevertheless, that was the evidence they used. There was 5 prosecution witnesses who were in serious trouble with the police at the time, serious charges against them, and they helped the police to get a conviction. So, and they got the lesser charges. You know, they got the charges dropped, or they were lenient in court with them. Now, one striking piece of evidence which got us convicted was a police officer. I won't name him, you know, for legal reasons because of your program, even though he's been mentioned before. He's on the documentaries I've made. You know, you can see who I'm talking about. But he was a chief inspector, and he was outside the cells, and he alleged me and Ellis Sherwood confessed whilst he was outside the cells and admitted the murder. Well, I can tell you now that conversation did not happen. And what we didn't know at the time, he had done this in numerous other cases, which when it comes to the appeal, I'll explain all about that. But, you know, he was definitely a corrupt officer. I was shocked that when he put this to me in interview. We were arrested on the 1st of November, 1987. We were released 3 days later on November the 3rd, pending further inquiries. I was being followed by the police. This inspector followed me, came to my home and said if I didn't implicate Ellis Sherwood, my co-accused, and say that I didn't do it, but he did, that we were all going to go down. A week later, on the 10th of November, he arrested us and we were all charged with murder. And that's where that self-confession come along, because that's what bolstered the case against us. And there was no forensic evidence, mind, no forensic evidence whatsoever, you know, linking us to the crime. And that's extraordinary when you consider what they did to this Philip Saunders. It was terrible, you know, it was terrible case, as they all are. Yeah.
I have given a background information to our viewers about the case.
Thank you, Michael. Can you share your feelings in the immediate aftermath of the guilty verdict being delivered in the court? How did you feel?
Oh, yeah, I was absolutely devastated. You know, I believed in the system. I didn't believe innocent people went to prison. I believed in the death penalty and everything. You know, I believed I was that strong. You know, I was brought up with good family values. My father used to say to me, don't you ever bring the police to my house. You'd only do it once, you know, that kind of thing. So we were brought up to respect the police. So when this actually happened, I remember it was the 20th of July, which is coming up to my anniversary in a few days' time, that we were wrongly convicted 37 years ago. And I will never forget that day as long as I live. I remember turning around to my father when the judge said, and the comments from the judge was very disturbing. He said, Mr. O'Brien, you've had every opportunity through yourself and your lawyers to present your case. We think you've been found guilty rightly, and there's only one sentence I can pass upon you, which is one of life, and 6 years for the robbery. And you could imagine my knees buckled, my legs buckled. I remember grabbing hold of the dock and turned around to my father and I said, as long as you know, Dad, I never done it, that's all what matters. And it was tears streaming from my eyes. I was 19 years of age. I just couldn't believe what was going on. I never believed that things like this went on. So I was really and truly awakened, if you like, in a harsh way. And the other thing as well, when I was on remand, waiting for the trial, my daughter died of a cot death, and my wife walked out on me as well, and I lost everything. I didn't have much money, but I had my family. But my daughter died of a cot death. I went to the funeral, and it was just horrendous. And I was in no fit state for the trial to defend myself. So that's you can see what frame of mind I was in. I was in prison for something I never done. I'd lost my wife; she run off with a friend of mine. My daughter died, and there I was on trial for murder for someone I didn't do. So for a 19-year-old, that was a lot to take in.
Absolutely. The next question, you've pretty much answered what I was going to ask you about the impact of this wrongful conviction on your personal life, on your family, on your friends, and you've just illustrated that. So one thing I wanted to move on to now is about prison life and ask you, how did you cope with the daily challenges in a prison?
Well, that's the point. I didn't, I never used to smoke before I went into prison, and I'd never taken drugs in my life before. But when I got to Long Lartin prison in Evesham, there was more drugs than what there was out on the streets. And I started smoking cannabis, taking cocaine, and doing things just to blot out the pain. And I'm not advocating, that that's a good thing to do, but that's the fact. That's what I did. That was the only way I could cope with it. Yeah. It took me 12 months. In 1988, when I was sent from Cardiff prison to Long Lartin, and I got there in 1989, it took me a year to get my head together, to really get off the drugs. And I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't cope. I didn't know how to fight back. I had no legal skills. I had no education. But when I did fight back, I found a psychologist, a woman called Fiona. I can't remember her last name. And I went down to her and I told her what had happened, that I'd messed up. I'd been involved in drugs. Could she help me? And it was the turning point.
I guess you weren't alone there, Michael. Lots of people in prison turn to drugs as a support.
There was a lot of innocent people in there. I used to hang around with, the Birmingham Six were in there. I knew Huey Callahan. I knew Johnny Walker. I knew the Carl Bridgewater Four. I knew them as well. I was in there with Vincent Hickey. I was in there with many other innocent people.
Was Jeremy Bamber there as well?
Jeremy Bamber was there. I know Jeremy Bamber quite well. I was in Long Lartin on D-Wing with him, and I am convinced he is a victim of a miscarriage of justice. You know what I mean? I've looked at his case. I am actually the patron of his campaign as well. I've spoken up for Jeremy on TV programs. I still do what I can where I can. But I've met so many innocent people in prison, and most of them, got to be honest, like Michael Shirley, done 15 years, he's out now. Peter Felden, 17 years, he's out now. George Longdon, 14. So my gut instinct wasn't wrong when I used to mix with the people I did. So, I had a good inkling who was innocent, and obviously you got some who said they were innocent.
That in time.
Yeah, you know who was who, and you find out quite quickly who's telling the truth and who isn't. So, and my gut instinct was spot on. But yeah, I was in a terrible state, you know what I mean? As you can imagine. I had a 1-year-old boy when I went into prison as well, and I had to fight from a prison cell to get to see him because my ex-wife made a number of allegations against me. I was in a vulnerable situation, and I had to fight to see my son, and it took me another year to see him. So once I got to see my son, and he ended up going to live with my mother brought him up since he was 6, my life started changing. I started to fight back and educate myself.
Were there any specific incidences or experiences in the prison that had a profound effect on you?
Sadly, there's been a number of incidences. I'll give you an example. The level of violence in prison, especially in the top security prisons, you can forget the local prisons like Cardiff Prison and Brien and whatever. I know Brien's been on the news lately for a number of deaths and everything, but there was 7 deaths in Long Lartin, and I was there when it all happened. And the one guy died in front of me. His name was Norman Manning. He died by another prison inmate's hand, and for 2 weeks I couldn't eat. I just seen this guy's face in my mind, and even as I'm talking to you, I can still see it today, like as clear as it's like a video. You can rewind it, fast forward, pause it. It's all part of what they call post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what sadly I have got. Most victims of miscarriages of justice do have that. So I think that's the most telling for me, is to see other human beings stabbing each other, killing each other, hurting each other. I mean, I knew I was in a dangerous place, and it was scary. I'm not going to say it wasn't. We all got to put this persona on, like, if you mess with me, I'll have a go back at you. But, deep down you were scared, and that's the fact. But it's all psychological as well, see, because you had to pretend to be a hard man to survive in it, because weak people don't survive. They get eaten alive. That's the sad fact of life.
I can understand that image would never leave you. And we know of late they've talked about the violence in prisons. How do you maintain hope or find strength during your time in prison? How did you maintain and keep going?
When I turned my life around, when I sort of seen the psychologist, that was the turning point for me. And what I did, I knew I needed to educate myself to find out what had gone wrong in my case. Nobody else was going to do it for me. And I'm a great believer, if you are an innocent man in prison, you cannot sit on your bum and expect your campaigners, your family to do it. You've got to take control yourself. This is what I did. Now, what I did, I didn't have no English skills. I couldn't read or write properly, but I passed 3, one after the other. I'd done English level 1, English level 2, English level 3. So there was my writing skills coming into play. Then I'd done maths courses. I'd done 1, 2 and 3 on that, ESA courses. And also I'd done a word power level 1. So I come up with 7 exams. Plus, I taught myself law. I don't know whether you're aware that I took 2 home secretaries to court when I was in prison over access to journalists. And that's my legal skills. And I was under Article 10, the right to free speech. That case went all the way to the
We
House.
mentioned you on our video of the freedom of speech. We did mention you.
Yeah, so, that was my legal skills. What I'm pleased about is I had 2 home secretaries, not one. I had Michael Howard, the Tory one, and then I had Jack Straw when he came in. So I was delighted to get 1 is a feat, but to get 2, and the House of Lords, 5 judges ruled in my favour, saying prisoners do have the right to speak to journalists. I left a bit of a legacy for all the other innocent people inside, so they could get and talk to the media.
Great.
So some good come out of my wrongful imprisonment. So that's all positive. And I would say to anyone who's wrongfully imprisoned, educate yourself. It's important. You need to know all the finer details of your case, what they did wrong, the breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, evidence that shouldn't have been admitted under the Section 78 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. You need to know all these things, and only you can empower yourself to do that. This is what I did. I was one of the lucky ones. I was so angry, man, that the anger didn't half carry me through, and I thought, you're not doing this to me, you buggers. I'm going to sort you right out. You watch now you hear the fight back begin. And that's what I did. And I did become a big pain in the bum to the prison officers because they couldn't cope with me. I was saying, I'm not interested in your parole. What are you going to do with me? I used to say to them, if you upset me, I'll take you to court. No problem.
That is an amazing piece of advice to give to our community. So any innocent in prison, do take your time to get knowledge in the law. And that's perhaps a great time to have a little pause and reflect. Thank you, Barbara and Michael, for this first part. If our viewers are inspired by Michael's story, please do like this video and consider subscribing to our channel to help us to humanize wrongful convictions. So this is perhaps a good time to go into our second part of this video, where we will look at the experience you had with the criminal justice system. So did you feel you had a fair trial at the time?
No, I didn't at all, because I wanted to call witnesses. We had an alibi witness and my lawyers didn't call her. And it was very important because on the night in question, we were 3 miles away when the murder actually occurred. So we would have to run 3 miles in 5 minutes. It was impossible. Linford Christie couldn't even do that. Or, you look at the 4-minute mile by Roger Bannister in the 1950s, and that's a proper athlete. So how the hell we done 3 miles in 5 minutes? Wow, where's my medal?
What was the excuse or idea of your defense team for not calling that evidence?
Well, this is the thing. I still don't know to this day why they did not call her. I thought right up until we went to trial that they were going to call her. And she wanted to give evidence. And what happened was the police told her not to turn up in court. So she didn't. She said she wasn't required. So where was my lawyers on that? We were at her house. Philip Saunders was murdered about 17 minutes past 11 in a place called Amnesty Court in Cardiff. We were the other side of Cardiff at 11:25. So therefore, the glass programme started at 11:30, and that's how she knew we were at her house, because she actually asked her son, Richard Yates, who also got pulled in for this murder, we could prove we were at his house. Now, that was significant. She could prove we had no blood on our clothes, no money bag like the police police were saying we had. We wasn't dishevelled like they tried to make out. And then we were happy, just jolly, like, and just a normal. There's no way we would have done them. You could see that we didn't do it. Yes.
Did you have the feeling that your defense team thought that you were actually guilty, and by calling evidence, they will make your case more difficult because they didn't know what these people were about to say?
Well, what I did do when I was on remand, I found out about this inspector, and he's made up confessions outside the cells before. And I brought it to my attention of my solicitor, and he said, "Oh, you can't bring that up in court." I said, "Why not? It's relevant. It's evidence of similar fact. If he's done this before and people have been acquitted, the jury got a right to know." Or he said, "I'm not getting involved in that." And I just knew that he didn't want to fight for us. He didn't want to challenge the police. Now, to give your viewers an idea, there was 115 breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act in my case when I went to appeal. And 3 solicitors, 3 junior counsels, 3 QCs, the judge completely missed them all. That's not an accident. That is not an accident. Missing the breaches of the pace once or twice, you could say, well, they were getting familiarised with it because he didn't come in until 86, even though it was on the statute books in 84. 115, that is corruption at the highest level. There was no doubt about it. They wanted a conviction, and our solicitors didn't do us any favours. That's the truth of the matter.
Yes, and that was my next question. Did you feel they represented you right? Clearly, they didn't.
No, they didn't. They didn't call witnesses, who could have proved our innocence. They didn't challenge the police officer's evidence. They let him, go in the witness box. I've done 30 years. I'm a police officer with an unblemished record. He didn't have an unblemished record, but that never came out. So what I did when I come out, when I done a civil action against the police, and I'm just running a bit forward a bit, I used a case called evidence of similar fact against this police officer about his previous convictions. And the House of Lords said that I could use it in my civil action, and the police settled out of court straight away because they knew they were in trouble. So that should have been known to the jury at the time of the trial. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't blame the jury, to be honest with you. If I was sitting there in front of the jury and I heard the way they manipulated the evidence, I can understand why they come to their decision.
Yes.
I just hope that the jury now, today, realise they made a big mistake. And whilst I can forgive them, I find it very difficult to forgive the police for what they've done.
Yes, of course, I understand that. And
yeah.
what do you think? We are advocating or supporting appeals campaign for majority verdicts. What do you think of the fact that you could have a few years earlier, in 1967, not be convicted because the unanimity of a jury was required then? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think they should bring that principle back because I think it will safeguard a lot of innocent people going to prison, personally. And secondly, if we would have been in 1967 or before, the fact is we would have been executed because the death penalty was still in until, I think we got to remember that. I'm one of the lucky ones. Timothy Evans wasn't so lucky. George Kelly was executed in 1948, for something he didn't do. Man from Liverpool. Terrible. There is no going back. And there's a lot of people, I get really angry when people advocate for the death penalty. I am so against it for many reasons. I wrote a book on the death penalty because I used to write to people on death row when I was in prison as well.
I see.
And they executed him in 2000, and I made a promise to him, if I got out before he did, or whoever got out first, that I would fight against the death penalty in Texas. And this is what I did. And I wrote a book called Killing Justice in the Lone Star State.
Where can our community find this book?
It's on Amazon and it's on Waterside Press as well. I've got a number of book publishers. I published 8 books altogether. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
Yes, I'm aware of some of them. I didn't know there were 8.
Yeah, there's 8. I'm on my 9th one at the moment. I'm writing about 3 Merthyr girls who got wrongly accused in Wales. Very interesting new evidence has come out on the BBC podcast recently, which I took part in, which is really good. So
great.
I'm still helping people, even though I've been out 25 years now. I'm still supporting cases like Jeremy Bamber's. There's other people as well. The Merthyr girls case is the Merthyr 3 in Wales, and it needs attention, because one of them haven't had their conviction overturned.
Now, did you appeal straight away your conviction, and what happened on your first appeal?
I can remember my first appeal like it was yesterday. It's all vivid. We got convicted in 1988, and it took nearly 2 years for our appeal in 1990. And we went up to the Court of Appeal. My barrister, the way he behaved was disgraceful. Yeah, my probation officer had to get him from his car and say, I think you want to go in there and tell the boys that they've lost their appeal. He was just about to leave and not even tell us. We were in the cells under of the Court of Appeal anyway. To cut a long story short, he come in and told us this is the end of the road. So I lost it then, didn't I? I went for him. I got to be honest with you. And the prison officer said to me, you know, you can't be doing that, O'Brien. I said, listen, he's telling me it's the end of the road. I've done a life sentence for someone I haven't done, I haven't done. And he's telling me it's the end of the road and he can't help me. I said, you better get him out of the cell now because I won't be responsible for what I'm about to do. So they have to get him out, you know, and I wasn't a violent man by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, can you imagine telling an innocent man, there's nothing I can do for you?
Of course. Criminal Cases Review Commission.
I got a lot of time for the Criminal Cases Review Commission on my particular case. They wasn't even in existence in the 90s, 1990. They didn't come into force until 1997. I know they're not so good now. I know there's a lot of faults. There's a lot of things which need to be changed, another body needs to be set up with the right wide-ranging powers to look at these cases. I have got some criticisms as well of the CCRC, but on my particular case, they've done a thorough job. I can honestly say they've done a really, really good job.
That's good to hear. Did they meet you personally?
Yes, they come in. My worker was a woman called Felix Robinson. She's not there anymore. She come in to see me. The only thing that was, at that time, I was very against the police investigating themselves. And they called in the Thames Valley Police to investigate. And I thought, oh, here we go. It's another cover-up, you know? And that's what I thought when I first met him. I was very upset about it. My solicitor, Gareth Pierce, was with me at the time. I don't have nothing to do with the CCRC. To cut a long story short, a couple of months later, I had a report from the Thames Valley Police. Wow, it was damning against South Wales Police. It was one of the most damning reports into a police force I had ever seen, and most people had ever seen. Breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. We were handcuffed to hot radiators in the police station.
I think there were 2 police operations on your case.
Operation Fortitude? Yes, well, I got to be fair to, there is one police officer I have got a lot of respect for. He's not with South Wales Police anymore, but he took over in the late 2000s. His name's Matt Dukes, and he apologised to me for what had happened. It took me nearly 30 years to get that apology. But I thought it was very brave of him, you know, when you consider the stance they took against me previously, saying, well, we've done nothing wrong. And so he's come in, he's investigated my case. It's the CPS's fault why no police officers have been brought to book in my case. He done everything in his power to get these police officers charged. Do you know what I mean? He did produce the evidence.
Can I also clarify, though? Yes, you say it's the CPS fault, but I understand that several of your witnesses who later admitted to have lied, they didn't want to give evidence, and therefore the CPS found themselves short with evidence from those witnesses. That's my understanding, because many of them didn't want to come forward afterwards, although they admitted they had lied.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they had their interviews when they went on national television that they perjured themselves.
Yes.
That should have been enough. The CPS, well, hang on, even if you don't want to say anything now, why have you gone on national television and given statements to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which was used at the Court of Appeal to overturn our conviction, but as soon as you're faced with charges...
But that's the problem with the criminal justice system. That is evidence that we will not be able to use in a court. We should be able to have any evidence that help a case, rather than having these strict rules where certain evidence cannot be used. So the first appeal was unsuccessful. The time when you had conviction overturned was through the Criminal Cases Review Commission in the golden time. So they were actually helpful to you, and you met them personally, which is amazing, which is what we want the Criminal Cases Review Commission to be today, which is nothing to what it was 30 years ago.
Well, listen, I'm in total agreement. I've got a number of cases. There's a couple in Wales, and the one case in particular, they called in South Wales Police to investigate. Now, they know that South Wales Police have done wrongdoing in 11 miscarriages of justice in Wales. Why call in South Wales Police to investigate the case which they originally worked on? Exactly. They're not going to find in favour. You have to have an outside police force. So I did take that up with the TCRC, and I wrote about it in my book, The Dossier. I wrote a book called Miscarriages of Justices from 1982 right up to 2016 in Wales, pointing out that there's been 15 cases, 11 proven, and there's 4 which still need to be looked at and overturned. And the pattern of behaviour right up from 1987, even to the present day, is still prevalent. using criminals to give false evidence against people, dropping charges on people so they'll give evidence for the prosecution. Those practices are still going on. And when they say that lessons have been learned, well, where to? Because I haven't seen any lessons being learned. And I can only say as I see it. So that's what I did with the dossier.
I will link all those books. Finally, let's get to the point that you were actually being exonerated. It must have been a surreal moment. How did you feel, and what's that like?
Well, I don't know whether you're aware that we got out a year before our appeal because we went for bail.
Yes, that was one of the first, no, or the only one.
Well, there was us and another guy called, I'm trying to think of his name now. He was an old man, Patrick something, Maguire. He got out because he was very ill at the time. And
but in your case, the bail given was on the damning report that came from,
yes, it was,
from the police, yes.
We went in front of a guy called Justice Hooper, who's quite a good judge. He's been involved in a number of miscarriages of justice, highlighting them before. And we surprisingly got bail. And I'll never forget this because a few weeks before we went for bail, I had an altercation with a prison officer. They were giving out tellies to prisoners. And he said, "Oh, you're not getting one." And I just said to him, "I'll buy my own telly when I get bail in a few weeks' time." So anyway, to cut a long story short again, on my way out of the prison, who was the last prison officer I seen? And I swore at him. I said, "I told you I could buy my own effing tellies, didn't I, when I get out?" And just walked past and just laughed at him. So you couldn't have wrote the script. So I had a little dig, like, you know what I mean? Like I was my way of, so that was great, that was. And I just walked on the corridor. But I was sitting on my bunk listening to Radio 5 Live on December the 21st, which was my daughter's birthday, the one I lost in prison, and Sybil Ruscoe come on the radio. That's going back some now, Sybil Ruscoe. I don't know if you remember her. Right? And they said the three men are going to be released in the morning on £5,000 bail. They're known as the Cardiff News Agent 3. And we had a documentary made in 96 detailing all the new evidence we had. And Phil Parry, who was the TV presenter, joined Sybil Ruscoe saying that we were going to be released. And well, the whole prison erupted. All the doors were banging. They're all going home tomorrow. Well, the prison officers didn't like it because I was the prison lawyer, wasn't I? So they didn't like me because I always used to stick up for the prisoners. So you can imagine there was a bit of fall. I remember my door opening. They gave me a piece of paper with my solicitors, and he went like that. I said, "Phone your lawyer." He couldn't even look at me in the face. So that night, all the governors were on the wing and the prison officers were all on the stairs. And I walked past them. I said, "See you lot. When I get out and I tell the press what you've done to me over the years," I said, "I'm going to hammer you when I write my book, The Death of Justice," because I already had the title for it, my autobiography. I said, "We'll see you as a last laugh because I'm going to expose you." Yeah, the next day at 4:00, we were released on bail. I'd never seen so many press outside the prison. I mean, it was just unbelievable. My son come running over to me. He was 13 by then. I scooped him up in my arms, you know what I mean, give him a cuddle. And then we just got taken to the BBC studios, and then all pandemonium broke out. I was doing TV documentaries. I appeared on This Morning, Kilroy, Trisha. I done all the chat shows and everything, I've even done some international, and that's how it's been since I've been out. But
I imagine you still didn't feel free enough until you actually had the Court of Appeal.
Well, I did do some demonstrations. I got frustrated after about 3 months of me being freed on bail. And there was Annette Hewins, who's one of the Merthyr girls, who did get her name cleared. We organised protests with other innocent people, and about 100 of us marched through the town centre in Cardiff. We had banners everywhere. "We want an appeal now. You've had enough time to quash this conviction. You've taken 12 years off me. You're not taking any more. You scumbags," we put on there. And we just threw with a lot of them. I mean, we did go over the top a little.
Michael, looking back, is there anything you wish you have done differently, either during the trial, during the incarceration, or after your exoneration?
I think I wish I never went out that night in question. I think that's one of the things, because if I would have stayed in with my wife and my child that night, that's the truth. That's the bottom line of it. And taking my responsibility serious as a husband, I shouldn't have been out doing those things. I should have been there. That was a big mistake. I always thought because I went out on the night to steal a car in question, I got done for murder and robbery for something I didn't do. And my advice to anyone is you don't have to fit in to be one of the boys. Just be yourself and do what you think. Have your own mind. So there is things like that I do regret immensely. But then on the other side of the coin, would I be the same person I am today? Would I be able to help other people? So maybe I was meant to happen. I don't know. But I look for it. There's a purpose. There was a purpose why I went through what I did. and I wouldn't have chosen that route. But there again, sometimes life can be mapped out for you, and you don't even know it. And that's how I look at it, and that's the best way to sort of move on, if you like, and do some positive things.
Indeed.
What advice would you give to someone who is currently in the same situation that you were?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do, you've got to take control of your own case. You know, you can't let your parents, you can't let your family or the campaigners who believe in your innocence, you've got to take control yourself. The first thing is to do is, if you've got no education, get on education lessons. Go and learn English, learn to read and write like I did. I wrote 2 award-winning books because I learned to read and write when I was in prison. I mean, that's how far it can take you. You need to know your case inside and out. You need to know the law. It's very important that you study the aspects of the law so you can understand what has gone wrong, what has been breached. Like in my case, there was Police and Criminal Evidence Act, 115 breaches, evidence allowed into the court which shouldn't have been allowed, should have been excluded under Section 78 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. You need to know these things, because if you don't, how are you going to progress? And I found once you know your case inside out, you've got more chance of getting a lawyer involved as well, because you can explain the case to them in layman's terms. Before, I can remember when I first wrote to people, I was like, my name's Michael O'Brien, I'm innocent. Can you help me? Because I didn't know what to... You've got to educate yourself. You've got to take that next step. And I would advise anyone, please use the facilities wisely. I used my time wisely in the end. And that's where I got where I am today. And I would advise anybody to do that, because that will help tremendously.
Thank you. How do you find healing and closure after such an experience?
Well, it's very, very difficult to find healing and closure, and some people don't. Unfortunately, there's been a number of miscarriages in Wales who have passed away at the age of 51, 49, because they've turned to drugs when they've come out and they haven't been able to deal with it. I did go down that road when I first come out, you know, after the euphoria died down. But then after 2 years, I managed to get myself on track. You've got to get help when you come out. You've got to find a psychiatrist who understands the complex needs of somebody who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I was out 3 years before I managed to get that help, but I went down some rocky roads beforehand. We need to catch them when they come out. There is, I don't know if you know, there's an organisation in London called the Miscarriage of Justice Support Service, where you come out, or where the case is referred back by the CCRC, they go into the prison, see the wrongfully convicted person, and they're waiting for them when they come out of the Court of Appeal, because most of them have got nowhere to live. So obviously they need accommodation and need ordered and things like that. And this is where this organisation comes into play. You know, it's based at the Royal Courts of Justice. So I hope that's going to be helpful for anyone who does come out. There is help available. There's also help in Scotland with a miscarriage of justice organisation where they do a lot of aftercare. When I first come out, there was nothing in place. I was just thrown out. Here's £46. Bye-bye. I didn't even have a train ticket. I'm like, what do I do now? You know, there's some of the negative things, but the positive things is there are things in place now to make things easier for you to adjust back into society. But you've got to get the help straight away.
Have you managed to actually personally ascertain that this organisation are there actually helping people? Because as far as I understand from Andy Malkinson, because he had the pill who helped him so much, he has been left with absolutely nothing. He has not had any help.
Well, I can only say from my own experiences, the Miscarriage of Justice Support Service have helped me with a number of serious issues. In my wrongful conviction. Carla was there many years ago. And as I say, everybody's going to have a different experience. I understand that. And I know Andy hasn't had the help he should have had. I'm very disappointed in that, but I don't know the reasons why he hasn't had that help. So it would be unfair for me to comment, but he should be getting the help. And I feel angry that he's not getting the help, because that's what they're supposed to be there for. And if he's not getting the help, then we need to do something about that. We need to rectify that. There's a loophole there, and that loophole needs to be closed as soon as possible. And I will be speaking to the Miscarriage of Justice Support Service to find out why they haven't offered this service to Andy Malkinson, because he deserves it and he needs it. We do need to look into that, and I will do.
Now, just finally, one more question, Michael. What are your hopes and plans for the future?
Well, I didn't know I had any hopes and plans, you know what I mean? But I'll tell you where I am at today, you know, so you've got some idea. I did try to rebuild my life, and I did get married in 2008. And I had another son in 2010, but he died of a genetic disorder in
sorry to hear
2012.
that.
So I didn't know what I was in a really bad frame of mind, as you can imagine. But I set up a charity. I done something positive, the Dylan O'Brien Foundation. Unfortunately, COVID took us, but we were supplying all the hospitals with life-saving equipment, which would have saved my son's life. So we've done some good. I raised quite a lot of money for charity. I won an award for my charity work as well, which I never thought in a month of Sundays I'd win anything. I just didn't think I'd win anything. And then I'm now living on my own. I'm bringing up my son on my own, Daunting.
How old is he? Is he 11, is it?
He's 11, he's 12 now, but he'll be 13 in a minute. But I'm bringing him up since I was 7 because of the circumstances, which, would be inappropriate to go into at this stage. The fact is, I'm living in a place called Aberdare in Aberraman, and it's a lovely place, lovely neighbours. They all know who I am, obviously, because of the TV documentaries I've done and stuff like that, and they're very sympathetic and they've been brilliant. They've helped us settle in here, and I'm hoping to do some more miscarriages of justice work. I'm having a documentary is going to be made about my life and all the work I've done with miscarriages. It's in the early days of commissioning at the moment. It hasn't been fully commissioned, but I will keep you up to date with that. But yes, there's a lot of positive things. And I'll tell you a few other positive things I've done with my life. I've done a TV presenting course. I'm a qualified TV presenter. I'm a qualified radio presenter. I went to university and done a radio skills level 2. I've done a criminology diploma I've got as well. I've done quite a lot with my life. And when I did the criminology, I had 22 straight A's. Really shocked by that, but I just want people to know, I don't want to think people I'm boasting. I just want to let them know, listen,
can happen.
You can do this. You can do this. You can turn your life around. I've done it. I wrote 8 books. Wow. I couldn't even read or write when I went into prison. I won 4 awards for my first 2 books, international awards, which the public voted for. I even beat J.K. Rowling. How the hell do you do that? So there is always hope, no matter what you do. You keep focused, you can turn your life around. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I got to be honest with you. I've met a lovely woman in the last few months. I'm keeping her name quiet in all the media and everything at the moment, but she is so positive. She's been through some of the similar stuff I've been through with the family courts. We relate to each other quite well. She's studying law in the 2nd year. So yes, and there is good vibes for the future. And I just want to say this to anyone who comes out: stay positive. Don't look at the negative, look at the positive things. And I'm going to run through a few positives. Okay, I got 12 years taken of my life. But look at the positive things. I studied law, took up 2 Home Secretaries to court. I've changed the law on 7 occasions by taking the police and the government to court. I wrote 2 books, got 4 awards, done charity work when I lost my son, won an award for that. So all them have got to be seen as positives out of the negatives. And you've always got to take them positives. And it is always a positive, but only you've got to find yourself. And only you can do that as an individual. And I just say this: if I can turn my life around, anyone can. Because, I still suffer, and I see a psychiatrist still. I'm on medication. I suffer PTSD, but I'll be damned if I let the system beat me. Oh, no, it's not beating me. No matter what illnesses I've got sleep apnea, I've got a few other health problems, but I wake up every morning and I think I'm going to fight on another day. And that's the attitude you've got to have, an up and at 'em sort of attitude, as the English would say, stiff up the lip. And that's the best way, to move on. And forgive people if you can. Don't forget what's happened, but forgive people for your own mind. Because what I found was I had poison running through my vein, the anger, the bitterness for the first few years. And all it does is destroy you. They've taken more of my life. And I didn't realise it until somebody pointed out to me. Now I can talk to you and say, well, if I bumped into the copper who framed me, I would say hello to him. I would speak to him like a normal person. And I would just say to him, well, you're a bad man. Your time is coming. Karma will get you. And I would just walk away. Yet when I first come out, I probably would have grabbed hold of him and God knows what I would have done to him. So there's the change in me and how far I have come. So I do hope that will be projected on everybody who watches this podcast. And I do hope I can inspire people to turn their lives around, because you can do it no matter what.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing your story with us today. Your resilience and strength in moving through this story is inspiring and offering insights to other people that might be in the same situation. I think it's a lesson for us all. And we hope that when the community are hearing your experiences, that they will gain a deeper understanding of the profound effect that wrongful convictions have and the importance of justice reform. Before you go, is there anything else you would like to add, or any message you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, the one message is never give up hope, no matter how bad it might seem. I was in that prison cell thinking, I'm going to die in prison. I'm never going to get out. But then the anger took over and I thought, right, you buggers, I'm not having this. I'm not going to take this. By and large, I fought back. Yeah, I suffered depression still, but I fought and I got myself out, and they can do the same. Never give up hope. Remember, innocent people are released every day at the Court of Appeal. A lot of these are mundane cases you don't hear about, but they're the facts. So innocent people do get out. Just hold that thought that the next person to get out could be you.
Once again, I echo Barbara. Thank you for your time and for your courage to speak out. We wish you all the best as you continue to rebuild your life, and particularly with your mission to advocate for change. So thank you so much, Michael. Thank you.
No, you're very
behalf
welcome.
of our
You're both
community as
welcome.
well.
No, you're both welcome.
You take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Michael's story provides a first-hand look at the flaws and failures within the criminal justice system, giving us a deeper understanding of its complexities and shortcomings. It also highlights the profound personal and familial impact of wrongful convictions. His experience serves to inspire us to support legal and policy reforms aimed at preventing such injustices, offering hope to others in similar situations by showing they are not alone. By sharing similar stories, we aim to educate the public, advocate for reform, and ultimately contribute to a more just and equitable society. I hope you have found this video inspiring, and if so, like it and subscribe to our channel to hear more about the devastating impact of wrongful convictions and the importance to contribute to strive for a fairer and more humane criminal justice system. It is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Join us again as we sit and rise in this unique trial.